The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back, everyone. First and 12 rolls on hour number 2. If you missed any part of hour number 1, check out the podcast feed. And this show always brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms and your favorite local brands. Macy's, happy shopping. Alex, it's our favorite segment of the program, the most challenging segment of them all. It's the Power Rankings.
The Big 12 Power Rankings. A weekly rank of all 16 programs, from the elite to the bottom dwellers.
Mitch, we've known each other quite some time. We tend to get along, don't you agree?
Definitely.
This is when we don't. This is when you and I. This is where you and I start to do the knockdown, drag out kind of stuff. But we ended up coming together on this first week. It was a little bit of a back and forth, but no problem. We'll get through it. Our power rankings, for the most part, like we have to be. You and I have to be unanimous. Like we can't split things. We fight off the air about some of these rankings, but this week pretty straightforward and some surprises, because you know what, it's not our power rankings without a couple of surprises here. So let's just go off going from 16 down to 11. First off, Houston, bad showing against UNLV. I mean, look, UNLV is a little bit more of a talented Mountain West team that we've seen. I mean, who are we kidding here, Mitch? UNLV scored 27 points before you even saw a score at all out of Houston. This is going to be a bad Cougars team, and we kind of assumed it was going to be, but, sometimes we get shocked. But, man, bad showing against UNLV, 27-7. A loss, one of the only 2 losses in the conference this week. And, if you're West Virginia and lose to Penn State, you don't feel as bad because it's a good Penn State team. But, man, they looked bad against UNLV.
It's going to be a long year for Willie Fritz in year 1. Donovan Smith, QBR of 3.5. Yeah, that was QBR, not good for Houston. Number 15, the Cincinnati Bearcats, and it's year 2 under Scott Satterfield. I thought last year Cincinnati was bad. They were the worst team in the Big 12, and hey, they get a win today. They take down Towson. I don't think there's much to take from it. It was a ball game at half, but Cincy gets the win and avoids embarrassment. I think that's the spot you're looking for when you're a team like Cincinnati.
Yeah, and look, again, between 16 down to about 12, this is going to be a toss-up. You're going to see some teams go up and down if you're familiar with the power poll. But Baylor, look, this is probably the biggest hot seat in the entire conference. Would you agree? Because you're looking at the Baylor Bears. You have Tarleton State come in. This is an in-state one for them. They fired off 28 points in that first half, and they were able to blow it up. And 45-3 over Tarleton State. That's fine. Baylor's got a lot to prove, though. That's a really, really bad FCS team with Tarleton. So there you go. If you're going to be wondering about whether or not this team is going to be good this year, we don't really know. But man, next week will be a huge test for them because, of course, they go to Utah. Technically, not a conference standings game. But obviously, they're going to be able to see if they're made of anything when they come to Salt Lake City and see what's going on with this Utah team.
Number 13, the biggest tumble in this week's rankings was West Virginia, who falls after a disappointing performance against Penn State. And look, I love that West Virginia challenges themselves in the non-conference. I admire that because it felt like there were way more FBS versus FCS games in week 1 than I can remember, Alex.
Yeah.
There was a lot of those matchups. And for the teams like West Virginia that stepped out of their comfort zone and played someone, I commend them for that, but they did not look good. And that's something that's concerning. And the thing is that West Virginia, Neil Brown felt like they got disrespected, but their 9 wins last year, they benefited from playing the 4 newcomers a season ago, and I just always had this fear that they just played a weak schedule last year, whereas this year it's not weak. They got a tough non-conference with Pitt and Penn State, and a loaded Big 12 schedule. I just feel like West Virginia takes a little bit of a step back. They know who they are identity-wise with their ground attack, but I feel like they take a little bit of a dip. Number 12, Texas Tech. They get that close call against Abilene Christian in overtime.
Yeah, Joey McGuire's got a lot to prove, and frankly, look, anybody can move up and down, especially in these lower numbers. You got to kind of do a lot to. You might fall a couple of spots, but you could do. If you have a good win, you could pop right back up in these power rankings again. So 52-51, not a good showing against an FCS opponent to win in overtime to eke one out. Speaking of eking one out, Colorado. This is probably the best FCS team that you saw facing off in the conference against a team. Colorado gets the win. They have to lean on their 2 first-round NFL draft picks in Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders to be able to get the win. But Coach Prime avoids the laughingstock situation for this weekend. Number 10, Arizona State. How about Kenny Dillingham and his guys absolutely blowing up Wyoming? That's a nice showing first week.
It was, and they put a lot of resources in the transfer portal along the trenches, offensive and defensive line. They lost B.J. Green, which was a big blow to their defensive front to Colorado, but they feel like they've got more depth than they have had in a few years. And, Dillingham, I think this could be a bowl team, and I thought that was a strong showing against an FBS team, and that stands out in this crowd because, again, I think you got to give a little bit of a reward to thumping an FBS team. It's one thing to beat someone 48-7 and it's an FCS. It's another when you're talking about a Wyoming team. It was a 9-win squad a year ago. So, that's earn your flowers, Kenny Dillingham. That was a good performance in week 1 this season. Let's go to number 9, team we haven't brought up yet that a couple weeks ago you thought, no way they're going to ever reach 9. That's BYU after a strong showing against SIU.
It's one of those I wonder what we're doing here, Mitch, if there's a little bit of bias because we were obviously both at that game. We watched this one closely, and you give a couple of extra points for dealing with the adversity that they did a couple of, a couple days before with their DC, Jay Hill and the heart attack situation and all that. So, but, man, I thought they showed out, and, they had a quarterback battle. You wondered if they were going to pick the right guy. At least right now it looks like they made the right decision with Jake Retzlaff. And that's a nice win for BYU. How about TCU at number 8? They get an FBS win against an ACC team. And checks notes, Stanford. Their first ACC home game in Palo Alto, California. Makes tons of sense.
It sure does. That's the new world we live in. I mean, honestly, when we talk about making sense, just reeling off this 16-team power rankings, it's a long list. It's like, wow, we're having to take some real time to piece this thing together. But strong showing from TCU. BYU fans know when Josh Hoover's good, he can be really good. And he threw for 353 against Stanford. Cam Cook, underrated running back. I mean, again, this league is just loaded. Cam Cook's got 81 yards against Stanford. I thought Stanford put up a better fight than I was expecting. I thought TCU was going to just blow the doors off them. But, TCU gets a win and gets the season off on the right footing in 2024. Number 7, Iowa State. Sound, solid victory against a good FCS team, North Dakota. I think the rule of thumb in the FCS ranks is to not play any Dakota schools. Well, they did. Iowa State did, and they won 21-3.
Yeah.
Kind of a vintage Iowa State performance.
Yeah, and Rocco Beck picking up where he left off last year, 20 for 26, 267 and 2 touchdowns, no picks. That Matt Campbell's got his guys dialed up, and you play North Dakota. I know it's not a state, right? North Dakota State, South Dakota State. But yes, it was a good win for them over the weekend. Not a lot of points scored, but that that doesn't really matter necessarily. So you get the win, and that shows out. And for me, that's one where I look and I say, that's a team that we look at and we go, that could be an absolute dangerous team at some point this year. Even Utah, who has to host the Cyclones up in Salt Lake at some point, that's going to be a tough one for them. How about UCF at number 6? We went back and forth about this one, but gave them a little boost week 1. It was a nice win for them. They blew the absolute doors off of their FCS opponents. So, scoring 57, that could be a very scary team, that one. And both Utah and BYU have to go to Orlando this year.
And what's frightening is they ran for 454 yards. R.J. Harvey, Penny Boone, one of the best 1-2 tandems in college football in the backfield this year. R.J. Harvey is probably the most underappreciated running back in college football. He is so good. 11 carries, 142 yards. I wasn't that impressed, though, with K.J. Jefferson, I will say. He had a pick, but you don't have to look that impressive when your team's running for 454. Heck of a performance by UCF's offense. Number 5, Arizona, when you talk about offense, we mentioned him earlier, T-Mac, going for 300 receiving yards. I think Arizona just stands pat. I think there's high expectations for that group this season. They feel like they can maybe get to the playoff. But I think those on the outside, Phil, year one with Brent Brennan, there's going to be a little bit of a transition. And you saw glimpses of that by giving up 30 points to a pretty weak New Mexico team. There's going to be a filling out because last year at season's end, Arizona was one of the best teams in college football. I mean, they were playing outstanding. They've taken a step back from that level of play on the defensive side, but Arizona is going to be a tough out in this league week after week.
The Kansas Jayhawks, that's on the list. By the way, this 5, we're going to see probably some movement there. It's like who's going to push the top teams out of the top of those rankings. But the Kansas Jayhawks, nice performance from them. They dominate, checks notes. Lindenwood, everybody's favorite FCS team. But, yeah, probably the weaker of the FCS teams that we saw facing off against teams here in the Big 12 this week 1. But number 22, Kansas, with a win over Lindenwood, 48-3. Jalen Daniels, everybody's wanting to know what that guy is going to do. And obviously, when you take on an opponent like that, you just want to get out of there with a big win, and they do, and then not get injured, which he doesn't. And so that's good for the Kansas Jayhawks. That
it was. First appearance for him since the BYU game last September for Jalen Daniels. Number 3, Oklahoma State, the Cowboys. We gave them a little bit of an edge over Kansas because the opponent that they played, South Dakota State, the defending 2-time FCS national champions, Oklahoma State took care of business against a good FCS program. So the Pokes, they go to number 3. I think you and I agree that we're a little more down on Oklahoma State than maybe most in the Big 12 media footprint because I get very guarded with that team because they have taken a dip in the recruiting as of late with Mike Gundy. He was annually getting top 25 classes. Now they're in the 50s. And I just always get a little bit worried when I see those trends. How realistic is it to be a Big 12 champion? Because if you're a Power 4 team, you've got to be an annual top 35 recruiting program to contend for a conference title. But, Oklahoma State, they got the best running back in college football in Ollie Gordon, and he showed out well once again.
Yeah, and what's interesting is think about last year at this time when we were talking about Mike Gundy and absolutely dropping the ball at the very front end of the season. Who did they lose to last year that we were who was it? Oh, Southern Alabama, right?
Yeah, South Alabama.
South Alabama. They lost to South Alabama at home, and so I think they looked at each other and went, you can't have something like this happen again. And to do it against South Dakota State, I think that's at least a better showing than they had last year at the front end of their season. Kansas State.
I will say, too, with Oklahoma State that Ollie Gordon, I appreciate Mike Gundy just saying, you know what, he's going to play. He might have had a DUI, but he's going to play. So there wasn't this ongoing issue with, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Sometimes as a coach, you can just say, hey, this is what it is, and then the story goes away. Something to think on going forward for coaches.
If a place is going to go, if a story's going to go away, it's in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
That's a good point.
Right? That's exactly where those stories tend to go away. Kansas State, number 2. I think people look at this team and Utah as being the class of the conference and a great start to the season for the Wildcats. It's going to be a very, very, very – it's going to be an interesting season because Kansas State doesn't really have that tough of a schedule. They don't have to play Utah in the regular season. Utah doesn't have to play them. They fire off a game against Arizona that doesn't count as the conference game like Utah has against Baylor. But, man, a game against Arizona, one of the top other 5 teams at the top of the conference, and that one doesn't count against your conference schedule. So Kansas State, number 2 on the list. And, of course, number 1, Mitch, the Utah Utes.
The Utah Utes holding it down, and rightfully so. I mean, they're the preseason favorite, and they did everything that you would expect from a number 1 team in the league against a far inferior Southern Utah team, but they thumped them. And, Cam Rising had a half of work, and did a really nice job. Well, it had 5 touchdown passes, and Utah rolled and did everything that would say, yeah, that's going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12, and they hold down that number 1 spot. And that's our Big 12 power rankings this week for week 1. So that's a jam-packed, loaded segment here. Every single week we'll roll out our rankings here on First and 12. We're taking the time out. On the other side, we'll dive in more into that Utah football game as the Utes jump out to a 1-0 start after taking down Southern Utah. It's Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Can't get enough BYU football? Listen to Cougar Nation. Mitch Harper takes your calls Monday nights from 6 to 7 on KSL News Radio. Podcast at KSLNewsRadio.com.
Welcome back. It is First and 12. Alex, Kirry, Mitch Harper. Thanks for joining us on the program. Yes, happy Sunday to you and happy shopping from the folks at Macy's who bring you this program every Sunday right here on the KSL Sports Zone 97.5 and, of course, KSL News Radio as well. Mitch, we're on a couple of stations because the show is so important now, all right? That's although I don't know if it's as important. Are you guys still taking calls? You're gonna get the guts again to take more phone calls on Cougar Nation to figure out how the fans are feeling on Monday nights, man?
We are, and last week we had wall-to-wall phone calls. I think we took about 9 phone calls in 1 hour, and that might not sound like much, but in a 1 hour show with commercials, Cougar Nation was ready to voice their opinion. But now that the quarterback situation settled for now for BYU, I'm curious to see what the reaction will be. What's the takes coming from the fans this week?
You know how fans are. They'll find a way to complain about something, right?
I'm sure there will be, and that's the beauty of shows like this and Cougar Nation, because college football, it's a sport that it creates a passion and takes that not many sports can create. College basketball doesn't provide this, but college football, you just have these endless takes because there's only 12 games a year guaranteed, and it just brings out the passion in people, and that's why we love it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this Utah game breakdown. The Utah Utes facing off against Southern Utah 49-0. When the season is when your team is 0-0, like when there's no record to be held to look at, all you do is just wring your hands over the things that could go wrong. That's what happens in the offseason. You also dream about things that could be for a team like Utah with the return of Cam Rising, with the return of Brant Keithy, with the return of guys like Lander Barton, Connor O'Toole. This team, Mitch, is absolutely stacked, and I think everybody, just like when we talked about BYU and putting at least to bed the unrest that was about the quarterback position, wondering about what Cam Rising was going to look like, if the rust was going to be knocked off, all those things that came with the start of the season. This Utah Utes team roll into the Big 12 in their very first season, not just as favorites, but I think now with Cam Rising having a 5-touchdown performance in just the first half, breaking his own record that he had previously. Well, his own personal record of 4 touchdowns in a game as a Utah quarterback. He had 5 in the first half against Southern Utah. I know it's Southern Utah, but a 49-0 win. This one was big for the Utah Utes, and they get their leader back.
That is right, and 513 yards of offense. And, I thought a storyline along with Cam and Brant Keithy coming back, and that was great to see them, connecting on a handful of touchdowns, multiple touchdowns, those two. Keithy ends up with 3 touchdowns on the night. But, I want to see the Utah offensive line. There were some questions maybe going in that offensive tackle spot to see, Lomu and Fano, how they were going to fare. And, I think that it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I think that's still kind of a work in progress. But, Utah's got talent across the board. I think that it's just kind of almost fine-tuning it a little bit, and that was because Kyle Whittingham, he's not handing these guys anything. He's probably, I can only imagine what he's ticked about. Like, what does he look like, or how does he analyze a 49-0 beatdown where they just thumped a team and the offense was high-flying? Yeah, that would be fascinating to really see, because Whittingham will find things that he did not like, because when you look at it from a fine comb like that, because when you're trying to be a playoff team and win this league, you got to drill down all the maybe loose ends and things that might be things that can cause potential losses or weaknesses. You got to tighten those up as you get closer to league play.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, the reality is that Cam Rising comes into this game. It's not just Cam Rising. It's also whether or not that connection with Brant Keithy was going to be found. And, boy, 3 touchdowns that he had just to Brant. It looked like they were just having a practice out there, Mitch. Like, nobody – like, that's the guy they're going to throw to, by the way. Have they circled that guy enough on film? They're going to throw it to number 80. And this is a guy who could go to the NFL. This is a guy who's on pace to go to the NFL before he got hurt almost 2 years ago, by the way. I mean, just to be able to jump that hurdle of getting over that injury, like I said, it was September of 2022 that Brant Keithy went down, and that's the last time he played a game. Last time that Cam played a game was January 1st of 2023 in the Rose Bowl when he went down with his knee injury. And so it's actually nice that these guys are back together. They get to have that final season with one another. And if Cam Rising can stay healthy, Brant Keithy is an absolute beast. And by the way, they have an absolute stable of running backs. I think that's the only thing that Kyle Whittingham worries about is because you didn't have somebody who just totally showed out. I think everybody's been waiting for Mike Mitchell to figure it out. Everybody's been waiting also for Jalen Glover, whether or not he was 100% healthy. Mekhi Bernard is a senior and a leader, obviously, there, but they're trying to spread the love around with those guys. And a stacked wide receiver room. You even get Caleb Lohner. I don't know, where did he end up? Where did he play in college? That story kind of falls deaf on me. I don't know where that kid comes from.
Yeah, a couple Big 12 schools, BYU and Baylor. You bring up the wide receivers, though. I was a little bit underwhelmed with them. Dadrian Zipper, he was the leading wide receiver. Obviously,
I thought we were going to see 250 yards out of Dorian Singer. What's going on here?
Dejon Stanley, running back, he goes off for 150, and he had some
on
huge
3 catches. Yeah,
it was a 50-yard average. You love that, but as far as just the wide receivers go, I think there's a little bit to be desired there. And Brant Keithy, he's great. Tight ends, you saw a little bit of that 14 personnel that was so much talked about in the offseason, but. Wide receiver, that's an area where you want more production from Utah going forward because, Keithy's going to he's always going to get his, but you can't assume Stanley's going to get, 100-plus every game. And then who becomes the wide receiver that takes on that 150 yards in future games? Like, they got options, and, we'll see more from Dorian Singer and high expectations on him, and that was the first glimpse of him, 2 catches, 31 yards. I'm sure he'll continue to settle in and take on a much bigger role and get more targets. He had 5 targets on the night, but that's an area where if you do come away wanting to maybe get kind of deep in the weeds and overanalyze, that wide receiver spot, you want to see a little bit more going forward.
Absolutely, and I think that they're also probably feeling pretty darn good about the fact that they didn't really utilize all their weapons and there is going to be a little bit of a spreading the wealth situation. You just can't. There's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense, and so there's a lot to figure out. We will take a break. We'll come back. Let's break down that Utah defensive showing. You talk about what Kyle Whittingham really loves. That 0 on the scoreboard is probably the thing that gets him the most excited about this team. So we'll chat about that and much more. We'll break down Utah. Man, isn't it crazy? They're in the Big 12 with BYU. You've got a 16-team conference. We break it down every week right here on First and 12. We'll take that break. More to go right around the corner. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back in. Hope all of you are having a fantastic Sunday.
Hey, it's Labor Day weekend, too.
Yeah.
Holiday weekend.
Good
Enjoy
times.
it,
This is one of the best weekends of the year. So much college football to consume, and we got a great sample size of Big 12 football. And it was, we saw the new faces in the Big 12 for the first time. I will admit, Alex, it was a little bit jarring to just see that Big 12 Roman numerals on Utah's field. We saw the logo get installed in the spring, and
right.
But just to see it there and realize that Utah is in the Big 12, it is surreal. Like the whole college football season, the dynamics, the layout, it does just feel so strange to see late night Big 12 ACC matchups after dark up until 1 a.m. Like, it's a new world, and, Utah's looking to, kind of occupy the new world order in the Big 12, but they're going with an old school approach with their defensive philosophy still winning the day, and that shined once again as they took down Southern Utah with a shutout, 49-0.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that gets Kyle Whittingham the most excited is that shutout, and he brought that up immediately in the press conference, right? He was like, "Always good to have shutout. Always good." It is awkward, by the way, for those Utah fans who had the Pac-12 tattoo or the lower back tattoo. Get it replaced with the Big 12 logo. It's awkward. Try to put it on the truck. BYU fans
open for business.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, get a Brett Yormark. That's what you need, Mitch. If you're gonna get a full tattoo on your back, make it a Brett Yormark.
Oh man.
Right on the middle of the back.
Him talking about UConn yesterday. Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
And addressing that on Big Noon Kickoff, I was like, no.
Hey, but you know what? UConn showed up big time this weekend. Jim Mora Jr. only giving up 50 in their first showing, of the season. Anyway, yes.
Let's not add a 17th team here.
Please don't. All right. So the Utah defense, Lander Barton out most of the year last year. That's a guy he's the Cam Rising of the defense. He's the guy who is going to be the one who's going to make an absolute fat paycheck on a Sunday at some point, and the family pedigree, all of those things, and he's back. On top of it, you have a defense that it just prides itself on. You talk about being the class of the conference. If there's something that they are better than everybody at, and they will continue to be better at, it's being so good on defense. But Mitch, what makes I think a lot of people jealous in this conference is the depth at every position. It seems like this Utah defense is just stacked everywhere.
They are, and a guy that's breaking out and is going to be, he has the potential to be an all Big 12 player is Keanu Tanavasa. Now, the broadcasters, you would not hear that pronunciation during the broadcast, which was not a ringing endorsement of Big 12 Now on ESPN+.
No.
They need to do a better job on their show prep there. But Keanu Tanavasa was impressive, 4 tackles. And, he was someone that signed with Utah back in 2019, LDS prospect, went on a mission, then gray-shirted. I mean, he's been around the Utah program, his name, in their pipeline for a long time already, yet he's only a redshirt sophomore. He's got so many years still ahead of him, and you just feel like it's clicking where he's going to be a star, like you've kind of grown to expect with so many Utah defensive linemen in their power conference era. Tanavasa is going to be a real force. I mean, he's 6'4", 301, and he looks like he plays fast, too, at his size. Tanavasa was really impressive, I thought, in week 1.
Yeah, and this defense overall is just, the thing that they take a ton of pride in is just having that front is just absolutely killer. I love Junior Tafuna, man. That guy is going to, speaking of guys who are going to have NFL paydays one of these days, awesome kid, and on top of it, just I'm glad to see him. Also one of those guys that missed a good chunk of last season with injuries. And Van Fillinger, of course, local product also. There's so many local names, right? Guys who prepped here in the state of Utah, and they stayed here in the state of Utah. Man, the talent is just deep, and Kyle Whittingham knows how to, and Morgan Scally knows how to recruit those guys, and man, they're winning a lot of those recruiting battles. So there you go. That Utah defense pitching a shutout, 49-0, their first game of the season against Southern Utah, and there you go. The Utes are definitely rolling here, and they of course fire up next week, taking on Baylor in Salt Lake City. That's a non-conference one, Mitch, because it was on the calendar already before everything, and Brett Yormark signed off on that one, not counting as a conference game. So there you go. All right, we'll take another break here. We'll come back. We're going to wrap the program here with a conversation about all the games that are going to be firing up this next week. So we'll get you ready for the Big 12 and 1st and 12 for next week as we get you ready. So stay right here, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
That's me. Welcome back into 1st and 12. Mitch, Harper, Alex, Kirry with you. We hold it down every single Sunday during the Big 12 football season, and we're doing it big this year because it's a 16-team Big 12, and we love optionality. We're going to be additive.
Optionality.
I got to bring in some bright Yormarkisms to every show. Every show, and
it sounds like an offense that's being run in the Big 12 somewhere. He runs the optionality.
I don't know why every time I try to do Yormark, it's a hint of Trump.
I know it does. It does. It's like
they didn't say we'd be on top. We'd be back on top, but we might not be back on top.
Right.
I don't know.
But you know what? At the same time, like they both have a lot of that that schmoozy salesman-y kind of thing, right? Like that's the vibe you get.
But Yormark is open for business.
Yes,
and
he is.
He has done a great job with this league where they're surviving. They're not the Pac-12 right now, and that is half the battle, is survive and advance as a conference every single year, and they survive and advance to week 2, these 16 teams in the Big 12. And I think the schedule is a lot better next week, Alex, and it starts off here locally. BYU going to go to the traditional Big 12 area, Dallas, to take on an ACC team in SMU. BYU, SMU, Friday night. A Cougs important game here to maybe continue to build this momentum.
Somebody was telling me that, and this is a massive mistake, massive oversight by SMU. They started putting up tickets for a couple of bucks. Like if you're going to get some members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints out to a game somewhere else, and you throw out a low price on a ticket, I'm sorry, you're going to get shown out by the visiting crew. But yeah, that's an SMU team that they have a history, right? And they played in the bowl game a couple of seasons ago, and obviously people think of the Miracle Bowl, very, very different time. But yeah, this is an SMU team that's now in the ACC, and BYU goes down there. I maintain they need to go 2-1 at the very least in their out-of-conference schedule. And now that you see that Wyoming could have some chinks in the armor, and you see SMU isn't necessarily as perfect as a team you think, there might be a possibility for BYU to steal one at SMU and then go up to Laramie and do the same thing up there as well. But that's a tall task, and that's maybe me getting a little bit ahead of myself there. But either way.
It's going to be a hot one, too, and that's one of the reasons they discounted the tickets. 96 degrees is the projected temp, so it is going to be a scorcher for BYU in Dallas. Utah going to have we talked about it in the last segment. They're going to have a game against a Big 12 team, but it's a non-conference matchup because it's a carryover of a home-and-home series from last year. Utes going to host the Baylor Bears. Baylor, this team's better. And DeQuan Finn, the quarterback, they bring in offensive coordinator Jake Spavital, who's a former head coach. Baylor gave Utah an absolute scare last season with the pig farmer. That was the worst offensive football I've probably seen from Utah in about 15 years, since the early years of the Kyle Whittingham tenure. I think Utah rolls in this one, but maybe Baylor can make it a little more interesting than what they were at the end of last season.
Yeah, we talked about Dave Aranda and how much of a hot seat he's on, and I don't think it gets much better next week because Baylor could go in and they could be the next victim of Cam Rising finding another gear, and that could be a tough one for them. The Battle of Iowa and Iowa State. Did you see that the Iowa Hawkeyes yesterday put up 40 points in a shutout? So, hey, don't discount Kirk Ferentz's blazing offensive possibilities there for the Hawkeyes. But that's a big one, of course, because Iowa State, I think, is one of those teams that could absolutely surprise some people. I don't know why people discount what Matt Campbell can do. Rocco Beck, Abu Sama, this is a team that I really like, and they're going to Iowa. They're facing off against a Hawkeyes team that's just perennially ranked high and don't have much going on the offensive side of the football. But they're kicking things off easy there for this kind of quasi in-state rivalry between those two teams.
And it's one of a handful of Big 12 games against Big 10 or SEC foes next week. Oklahoma State hosts Arkansas, and Arkansas had a massive performance with the return of Bobby Petrino. They went 10 for 10 consecutive drives with 10 touchdowns. Arkansas looks loaded, so that's going to be a really good test for Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State, and then Kansas.
Did you just throw out? Did you just throw out a? It's good to have Bobby Petrino back in Arkansas.
Yes.
Reference, is that what you did? Wow.
Yeah. Well,
redemption trail.
Let's face it, the guy, he's got great offense. The neck brace was iconic, but
the neck brace.
It had to be brought up.
What a dork that guy is.
That guy is. Hat and the neck brace, that's iconic. Look, that's a great fit. That's Bobby Petrino's fit.
I was in a motorcycle accident. Oh, my goodness.
Kansas goes to Illinois, and then Colorado. This is going to be a good one. They go at Nebraska. Do you think the Buffs can upset the Cornhuskers?
You know, the Cornhuskers are interesting because Matt Rule typically does well in year two. I just don't believe it all in Colorado. They're going to Memorial Stadium, too. Lincoln's not an easy place to play. Boy, how the mighty have fallen. This used to be one of the premier matchups in all of college football. It's been relegated to us looking at it going, is that even going to be a good game? But we'll see. I believe Nebraska is going to get Colorado. I don't know what Colorado's got going on, but right now it's not good vibes, and it certainly is not a lot of consistency.
One thing we do have going on next week, we're all Houston Cougar fans, and it's probably not going to lead to much, but they're playing Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
And all the Big 12 can agree they're pulling for Houston to pull off a miracle, which I don't think is going to happen, but I bet the Big 12 offices in Irving are hoping for it to happen.
A couple of former stops of May He Rest coach Mike Leach, Washington State hosting Texas Tech. Washington State, by the way, putting up a lot of points in this last first week. And Texas Tech, obviously, last year they went on the road to Wyoming, and that was not good for Joey McGuire's squad hitting the road. And Washington State, I think, just like Oregon State, has got a lot to prove this year as a two-team power conference, the Pac-12. It's back, baby.
Would you, Alex? I'm asking you on the spot here.
Yes.
Would you want UConn or Washington State as a member in the Big 12 next?
Washington State, hands down.
Not even a question. Not even a debate.
Not even a question. What is
UConn basketball doesn't do it for you?
No, it does not.
Okay.
No, it does not. And honestly, it makes a difference to have a team that is kind of here. You know what I mean? I do not care about where is it? Storrs, Connecticut. I'm not interested in adding another team that BYU and Utah are going to have to travel out to. And, just for the sake of being like, oh, UConn's in the conference as a basketball team. No, thank you. Give me Oregon State and give me Washington State. I'm one of the few people that – and it's because I grew up a Pac-10 guy, a Pac-12 guy, so – I like those programs, and I think they bring you a lot, and I think that Washington State and Oregon State have a lot to prove this year. I bet Texas Tech goes up there, and they are going to struggle.
Arizona, TCU, they play FCS opponents. UCF's got Sam Houston. West Virginia's got Albany, an FCS opponent. Cincinnati's got a good one. Pittsburgh coming in, and Kansas State plays Tulane. So loaded schedule next week. I think we're going to have a lot more to kind of digest and learn, and kind of get a clearer picture of what these teams are looking like this season.
Mitch, we fired off the first week of 1st and 12,
we did it.
Man. You feel good about it?
I feel good. It's a good start.
Absolutely. Let's get it going. We got so much more to go. Mitch, this is going to be a fun season, man. I'm looking forward to it. Many thanks to our producer, Eric Cabrera, who does a phenomenal job every week. The team is back, baby. 1st and 12. Again, we'll be back again next week. Join Mitch on Tuesday for Cougar Nation. Join me every day on the KSL Sports Zone with Jeremiah Jensen, with JJ and Alex. We're going to be back again next week, another edition of 1st and 12. So for Mitch, I'm Alex. We'll talk to you next week, everybody.